Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Adult Mentor Pitch Wars live mentor video chat. I think I said that in the wrong order, but it's fine. I am Sarah Nicolas. I am on the Pitch Wars board, and I'm the agent liaison this year. If you don't know what Pitch Wars is and you're just like stumbling across this video, you can find out more information about pitchwars.org, but in summary, it's an annual mentoring event where authors and industry professionals choose one author to mentor. They do a full round of revision on their manuscript and then ends in an agent showcase. And the entry process is competitive and mirrors the traditional querying process. But yeah, make sure you go to pitchwars.org if you're not entirely sure what Pitch Wars is, so you can learn more about that. I'm checking my lists, so I make sure I hit everything. The wish lists haven't been announced yet. They will be announced on September 12th. So our mentors today will not be able to answer any questions related to wish lists or what kind of tropes they like or anything like that. If you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, like if you're watching embedded in those sites and you want to ask questions or participate in the conversation, go ahead and click on through to YouTube because that is where the chat is. If you are on Twitter and you tag the Pitch Wars account with a question, Lee Marr, our social media director, is live tweeting this today. And so she might be able to bring your question over from Twitter, but it will be faster if you go ahead and do it yourself. Also, I want to mention Susan Lee, one of our mentor liaisons and committee members, is moderating the chat today. So thank you, Susan, for being here for that. You can go ahead and start asking questions now. I'm going to ask the mentors to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive right into your questions. Submissions open on September 27th. We also have 6 more video mentor chats coming up and a whole bunch more Twitter mentor chats coming up as well. So you can find those on the Pitch Wars blog. That reminds me, I meant to see if I could pin that post for a while. So I'll try to do that after this chat. And now we're going to have the mentors introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Marianne.
Hi, I'm Ann Marlowe. I also write under the name Lorelei Parker. I write contemporary romance and romantic comedy. I have a few novels out with Kensington, and I was a mentee in 2014 for Pitch Wars, and I've been a mentor since 2015 every year, and I am a Pitch Wars true believer.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I write as Penelope. I write fantasy and paranormal romance. This is my first year as a Pitch Wars mentor. I am a co-mentor with writer Denny S. Bryce, and yeah, I'm excited to start.
Hi, I'm Ian Barnes. I was a mentee in 2016 and in 2017, so 2 times. And since 2018, I've been an adult mentor. I write primarily various flavors of fantasy.
Hi, I'm Kellye Garrett. I was a mentee in 2014 along with Marianne, and I got my agent through the showcase, and I actually published my Pitch Wars book, which is Hollywood Homicide, which actually ended up winning the Anthony, the Agatha, and the Lefty, and the Ippy Award for Best First Novel. I've been a mentor since 2015. I've done it every year. I've mentored about 6 people, and this year I am mentoring with one of my 2017 mentee, Mia Manansala. I am also on the Pitch Wars committee. I'm the mentor liaison, which means I mentor the mentors. And there's a really good chance I am going to share my wish list, but I don't plan to. So fingers crossed I don't.
Hi, I'm Stephen Morgan. I've been a writer, but mostly an editor for a little over a decade. And I started in literary fiction, and then I got into horror, mystery thriller, sci-fi, fantasy, and then I was in romance for a long time. But I got to work with some people who they won some awards, hit a couple of bestseller lists. So this is my 3rd year mentoring with Pitch Wars. And I'm hoping to have another great year. Thanks.
All right, so I'm just going to keep my cursor over Kelly's mute button. Okay, so we don't have any questions yet, which like yesterday or Friday by this time we had like 20 questions. So We did have one question that y'all can't answer is, are any of you taking memoir? And you'll have to check the wish list for that. Is it okay for writers to apply when their manuscript will have British voices rather than American? Yes. Anything to add? Okay, cool.
I don't mind that. That's fine.
I feel like our mentors are, we take great pains in choosing our mentors. I think they're all smart enough to realize like when something is happening in British voices, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think unless there's like a weird spelling that I try to correct, that it's like, oh no, this is how we spell it here. But
Yeah.
I love British voices.
All right, so Lodestar has a question, fun question. What makes Pitch Wars fun for you?
The bad answer is trolling my friends. The good answer is, I don't know, I like getting to help people with their books. I like seeing all these different types of stories. And I mean, I edit as a technical writer for my day job, so I'm kind of always in edit mode even when I'm reading. So I figure if I'm doing that, might as well help somebody.
I think for me, it's definitely the community, like people here, Marianne, Sarah, everybody, just knowing these people and going along the journey with them and having these people to talk to and kind of, because publishing is it sucks. I'm going to say publishing sucks. Okay. And it's really good to have someone who can hold your hand and can be there when you want to, complain about it and celebrate your victories and be there when you have for your losses as well. So to me, like Pitch Wars is such a great community. And I definitely encourage everyone to kind of go on the hashtag Pitch Wars and just try to meet people, so even if you don't make it as a mentee, you're still going to be able to build that community. You're still part of the Pitch Wars community. So.
I have a very long answer, but I'll try not to make it really long. But I like everything about Pitch Wars, like from the very start of it, when everything gets rolling like this. These kinds of activities are so much fun and there's so much to learn. And the hashtag can be such a blast. And I meet people on the hashtag and also people who submit to me, even if I don't end up choosing them. There's authors that I've become friends with and I still support and whose books are coming out and I'm reading their arcs, and it's a long, long process that goes beyond this window of time. And I enjoy all aspects of it. It's so positive and a blast. And also I get to meet these people and I love.
All right, great.
I'll go. I'll answer.
Okay, go ahead,
Okay,
Stephen.
I was just waiting for my turn. So I like it as a chance to give back to the community, because for me, the whole mentoring experience is what I do all year anyway, which is work with writers at varying points in their career, but really to help them figure out where are you at, what do you want your career to be, and what is the next step, whatever that is. And so part of what I love about Pitch Wars is getting a chance to look through like a different kind of slush pile and find people. They may not be ready to be published, but they have such incredible potential. And I can help them take the next step so that I can show them, if you do these things, maybe not this year, but certainly you'll be on the right path and you're just waiting for the right opportunity. You'll be ready for it. I like being able to find people and give back to them at no cost to them, because I've had a great career over the last decade. And I wouldn't be here if somebody hadn't given back to me without asking for anything in return, which is, what we're doing as mentors, helping somebody just out of the generosity, the chance to be generous to people.
All right, great. I love that. I was actually thinking on the drive over today about sometimes people are like, well, what do the mentors get out of it? Are you paid? Blah, blah, blah. No. But I think like anyone who has service in their heart, like kind of understands what we're doing and why we do it. But anyone who doesn't understand that kind of thing, that they're going to look upon it with skepticism and be like, well, why are they doing it? And really the answer is everyone's just doing it to help writers, to help other people up, because we've all been helped in some way. All right. Question probably mainly for Leslie and Ian. Is fantasy comedy a la Pratchett and Douglas Adams still viable? Oops, sorry.
I would think it's still viable. I'm trying to think of anything recent. It might be a little, if you can't find a good comp that's in the past 3 or 4 years, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But something like The Kings of the Wild, I can't remember the author. It might not be in that exact vein, but I do think people are publishing fantasy comedies, and I think that, especially, you have to look at the climate of the world, and that kind of, and publishing sort of wants to be, it influences it. So when things are difficult economically, socially, everything, people want to read lighter things. So I feel like that's also a good reason why you could probably make a good case for that being viable, even if you're not seeing a ton of them being published right now.
Yeah, I agree with everything. Kings of the Wild was Nicolas Eames, one of my favorite books. And yeah, it's not necessarily categorized as humor, the way something like Christopher Moore's books would be. I would argue that Christopher Moore, a lot of what he writes would be filed under like science fiction, fantasy, comedy, but it ends up being filed under fiction because it's just like general humor, even though he writes about like the Grim Reaper having like a kid and doing. There's definitely a market for it. It's just finding the comps is going to be tricky. You might have to look outside of the science fiction, fantasy shelf to find them, but they're definitely there.
I was thinking about Delilah Dawson, and I can't remember who her co-writer is. The Kill the Farm Boy.
Oh yeah,
That's one of the more recent ones I've seen.
Kevin Hearn.
Yes, yeah. Kevin Hearn. All right, Jennifer has a question. Tips on writing a good synopsis. I'm finding it more challenging than writing the book.
Same. I hate synopsis. I think what I try to do is I start off with trying to do a longer one and kind of looking at each chapter of the book and trying to summarize the chapter. And then once I have that, I keep cutting it down and cutting it down and cutting it down. And I think also I write mystery, but I do have subplots. So I don't include the subplots. I just include the main mystery, and I only really include the characters that are going to become important like later on in terms of clues and red herrings and suspects and of course, the killer. So
there's a really good synopsis starter on, I think it's on PubCrawl. If you Google synopsis Star Wars, you'll probably get a Star Wars synopsis, but if you add to that, like for writers or something, you can find this and it basically takes all of Star Wars and shows you how a synopsis can be broken down into like inciting event, dark moment, all these different parts of your book, and you can kind of just fill it in and then see. I mean, it's a really great way to get started on a synopsis, and then you can fill it in as it works for you and throw out what you don't need.
Yeah, I think starting with a beat sheet like that, like Save the Cat is something that I use, and it's got, I think, 11 beats of the story. And so if you just focus on the big turning points and that, like Kelly said, the A plot, not necessarily the subplots. If you're using some kind of plotting system, if you're a plotter, or if you retroactively go back and look at a plotting system and say, okay, this is what I did, and just find maybe not 11, maybe 5 or 6 big beats, then you can build a short synopsis off of that.
Yeah, one specific tip I found very helpful when I've had to write a synopsis was to condense the most important aspect of every chapter into one sentence, string them all together, and that's worked well for me in the past, except it gets a little painful when you have to write a synopsis for a book you haven't actually written yet. Then it's a little tricky doing it that
way. Okay, those are all really good tips. I would add 2 things. Well, one, shameless promotion. I've got my own version of how to write a synopsis on my website, which is stevenedits.com. Right? You just go to the writing tips and you'll see where I've got a section that talks about some of the things that other mentors have mentioned, where I walk you through like a different kind of version of the beat sheet. And I've got, lots of GIFs that show you movie examples, blah, blah, blah. So the other thing that I would say to look at is that to actually help me, as much as we deride podcasts that are essentially summarizing movies, to me, they're a great tool to learn how to write a synopsis, because they give you a different perspective on how to write a synopsis for a movie or a story that we're all familiar with, and how to put some voice into it, how to mention the bigger plot beats so that they have a sense of setup and payoff, while also not getting into like the weeds and all the little details that really aren't servicing a synopsis, a way to tell like the story from beginning and end, but also maybe to make it sound compelling, because you want the agent or the editor to think, oh, this sounds like a book that I want to read. Let me open it to the first page now that I see the story holds together.
All right. The pub crawl article was mentioned in the last mentor chat as well, when we were talking about synopses as well. So a lot of people have that recommended. All right. Beth asks, will mentors be looking for something specific in the query letter and synopsis? But reminder, you can't talk about your wish list. I don't know how you're supposed to answer this question.
I think I just judged a contest, and it was kind of similar. You had to do a synopsis, and without going into the specifics, general interest, like the synopsis and the query letter, in my opinion, the query letter specifically, let's take that first, a little bit of personality and just the ability to communicate well is kind of what people are looking for. Can you, I mean, not necessarily hook someone, but can you just exhibit your ability to communicate something very clearly? And the synopsis is similar. You're looking for, does the story structurally seem like it works? Like I was doing a romance contest, and at the end I was like, well, one of the basic tenets of romance is a happily ever after. And the synopsis did not indicate that there was one. And I was like, how is this, so basic things where if your genre has certain genre conventions, the synopsis should show that that it has the genre conventions. And then if you're trying to do something really crazy and out there, just do it carefully, I guess is what I can say.
This is not related to my wish list at all, but if you are doing a synopsis for a mystery, you need to say who the killer is in your synopsis. A lot of people don't do that, and you have to do it. You don't do it in your query letter, but your synopsis needs to say who your killer is.
I agree with that. Don't leave big surprises out of the synopsis. We need the twist ending or whatever the big reveal is in the synopsis. And what I would say for query letters is I want the query letter to present to me what you think it is about your book that's going to make people want to read it. What do you think this is about? What is the point? If you only have, a sentence, but you get a whole query letter, what do you see as the reason people are going to want to pick up this book? Because that gives me the expectation for your synopsis and then your manuscript. And then also, as Leslie said, I would love to see just a little bit of your personality. Give me a sense that you're somebody who I want to read a book by, I want to spend some time with, and maybe I want to work with.
I'm going to jump on that to say, when you say personality, and I'm sure you mean in your voice in the query, because a lot of times what ends up happening is like I get a long bio, and that's not where I don't want to read about your bio. I want to read about your book. A bio is good to be short and tell me like why it's relevant that you wrote this book maybe, but it should be the smallest part of your query, and the voice and the personality that's in the query is going to show me that you have like the ability to entertain me, and also that you have a premise that's hooky, that has stakes and some conflict in it that I'm going to want to know, like, how does this get resolved? The synopsis is going to tell me how that gets resolved, and I'm going to be able to tell what, like, as Leslie said, that there's a structure to this novel that it fits in the genre that you're writing for.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to all of that is that for pitchwars specifically, I mean, I know I'm not alone, but I'm just going to speak for myself and saying, like, I don't care if your query letter is a hot mess. I don't necessarily care if your synopsis is a hot mess, because if you're chosen as a mentee, that's something I'm going to help you with. Like, I don't expect you to have the skill for query writing, because it's a very different skill set than actually writing a book. Like, it took me, I stopped naming drafts of my query on my Pitchwars 2016 book and just started labeling them in very long expletive lines. So like it's definitely a different skill set than writing. So I'm not going to expect perfection.
Can I jump one more thing back in? That's true. And what I want to say is every mentor reads the first chapter. So if your query letter, a query letter to me is sort of like I stick a pin in it. I say, this one sounds really interesting and I'm looking forward to reading it. But the first pages can completely overwhelm the premise. And if it's a really, really good first few pages, then that'll weigh over whether or not the query letter was, grabby. So there are two parts to the judgment, to judging what we want to continue reading.
I'm actually similar, where I actually read the pages first, and then after I read the pages, I'll go and read the query letter. And I'm not going to say what I'm taking, but based on what I'm taking, I really don't necessarily read the synopsis until unless it's like I'm reading pages first. I request some pages and I am not really sure. I'm kind of on the fence and I kind of want to see where it's going. So
I will say, even though everyone's like, even if your query is a hot mess, there are different levels of hot mess.
Make an effort.
Yeah, last year we got some submissions where in the query letter portion, it just said, read my first pages. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about making an attempt and failing anyway. Don't not make an attempt.
No.
Kellye, me and Kellye both have access to all the submissions as they're coming in. So we usually see all of the not all of them. We don't read all 4,000 or whatever it is, but we do kind of take a look at a lot of them. So we see some of so I was trying to caution, like, even though they're saying don't worry about it, like, worry about it a little bit,
Definitely put your best foot forward. Yeah.
And that's part of the personality aspect too, right? Like, you followed the guidelines. Like, that's part of it.
I'm so big on rules. Like, if not saying that the rules, but the idea of, like, if you get instructions for pitch wars and you don't follow them, that makes me a little nervous that you're not going to, follow through on some other things. So I'm really big on, like, that to me is one of those things where I'm like, okay, did you follow the rules? You get a point for that. And if you don't, it's I'm a little bit wary. So,
yeah. Jessica Borsey asks, how do you begin the revision editing process for yourself? And how is it different when you're a mentor or critique partner or beta? What do you target first, etc.? I'm sure everyone has different revision processes. So,
and each book sometimes needs a different revision process. I've found it really depends on what the problem is with the book, or what you feel, how close you got on your draft. So personally, I write fast drafts. I write the first draft as quickly as possible, and I'm dumping out ideas, and then the revision is about sculpting that into something that is readable. When I'm looking at someone else's, I always ask, what do you think the issue is? Like, as a critique partner or as a mentor, tell me what you think is wrong here, or what you think you didn't get right, and then kind of have that in mind, but also evaluate it. It's a really tough question because every book is a little bit different. I go from big to small, and I'm like, okay, big picture stuff, let's fix the structure. There's no point in line editing before you get the structure right. And then that's kind of, making sure that it fits genre conventions, kind of the things we were talking about, but as a story holds together and does the things that stories should do, and then focus on the smaller aspects.
And for me, the thing that makes it different depending on each book is, for me, the big question is, what experience is this trying to deliver or manifest for the reader? And so if I'm writing a book, just like Leslie, I probably am speeding through the first draft, because as much intention as I may have, I probably don't know what I'm manifesting until I have a finished draft. But as an editor or a mentor or a critique partner reading someone else's book, well, they have a finished draft. So now what I'm helping them do is read it and see, what do you have here? What kind of experience does this manifest for a reader, or at least for me? And how can we take that awareness to strategize the revisions based on how much do you want to lean into that? Or do you want to manifest a different kind of experience for the reader? And within that, we're looking at all the different elements. And the different elements matter because now we're saying, based on what you want to manifest for the reader, what is the setup for all of that? And what is the payoff for all of that? And how do you make the reader yearn for that payoff so that when they turn the last page, this is the kind of experience to take away from it. Maybe not a particular message that you want, so you're being, you know, preaching at them or something, but you did give them a kind of experience to make them think about this kind of thing or experience that kind of thing. And what sets that up or pays that off is going to be a different kind of sequence of elements depending on the book and author.
Spreadsheets. I reverse engineer my books, and I figure out what the what all of the chapters are, what the plot is in each chapter, what the purpose of each scene is, and then I like to look at beat sheets. I don't like to live by beat sheets, but I like to compare to beat sheets to make sure that things are aligning to a certain expectation. And then I do my you know, I plan out ahead of time, like what do I need to do to accomplish the things I want to, as Stephen said, what experience I want, maybe want to get to, like what things do I need to weave in, what things do I need to take out, and then I plot it all out and try to figure out what scenes those need to be maybe just eliminated or added, or new characters, or all that kind of, it's different for every book, as Leslie said.
You know, Marianne and I are so similar on so many different things. I also use beat sheets as like a diagnostic tool as well. Sometimes I'll do it after the book is written to like take a look at my plot pacing.
Yeah, I find it.
Love spreadsheets.
I have tried to do it ahead of time, because every time I do it after, I'm like, why didn't I do this before? It's like 30 lines, and it's like, but I try ahead of time, and I'm a diehard pantser, so every time I try to do it, I just get stuck, because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen like in advance. How can I know that? I haven't been there yet.
We have two questions that are very similar that came in within like a minute of each other. Camille asks, what is your biggest pet peeve with past submissions? And Beth asked, very similar, what is your biggest turnoff in a submission?
I'll go first. The biggest pet peeve I have, and this applies to some like published books as well, is it drives me nuts if your first page is one giant block of text. Like if there are no line breaks, if there are no paragraph spacing, if it's like your page is an entire paragraph per page, or maybe 2 paragraphs per page, like my eyes start to glaze over as I read that, and that just drives me nuts.
That's so funny, because so I trained in fundraising for a while, and like you don't write any paragraph longer than 4 lines long, because people don't read that in letters. And now I've like taken it into my fiction, and sometimes I feel like my paragraphs are too short.
And if you write in like Scrivener, it's just one line all the way across, so it looks like you just have a bunch of sentences.
Yeah, I'll do like a one word paragraph sometimes, because I'm a short paragraph person, because I have a journalism background as well. I think I said it earlier. For me, it's like if you don't like if it's not properly formatted, you know, if you don't follow the basic instructions, that to me is a turnoff, because like I said, it just makes me think that you're not going to, you know, put your all into it, or you think that you're, you know, there's certain things you should do. So that's to me a big turnoff. I don't really necessarily have any writing turnoffs that I'm like, that's a no to me, because I feel like that could be addressed in mentoring if I love the book enough. So
I was thinking a similar answer to Kelly. There really isn't anything that's a pet peeve of mine or a turnoff as far as the story or the writing. If it works, it works. If you have a creative approach, I don't care how many writing rules you break. But if you can't follow simple submission guidelines, I'm going to wonder, what else did you take exception with that maybe could have used some kind of self-awareness? Or, I mean, if that's the beginning of our collaboration, me saying, if you're going to submit to me, just follow these 5 simple rules, and you won't do that, it gives me the impression that we might have a troubled mentor-mentee relationship.
Anybody else want to share your pet peeve? It's your time to.
I'm like, I don't really have any either. Maybe, I mean, I could say if the dialogue is flat, I mean, things like that might make it harder for me to get engaged with the voice of the story, but I can't name a thing that in the past I've said, you know, is a total turnoff. It's more the other way around. What jumps out and grabs me And those are the things that I'm going to gravitate towards. And everybody has, they're all at a different place in writing. So it's not even the best stories aren't necessarily going to be what I want to read. There's some of the most successful novels on the market right now are books that came into my submission queue that I did not request. So it's all subjective at a certain level. And I would say it's not about turn-offs, it's about turn-ons.
I do have some, since I'm science fiction fantasy, too many proper nouns in the first paragraph. If you're dumping names, especially with lots of apostrophes, all in that it's difficult to get into. So for me, especially with the opening, if it's difficult to find a character and have an emotion about that character, so dumping proper nouns, starting with dialogue and lots of dialogue when you don't know who these people are and you don't care about them yet, that's a pet peeve of mine, and it just makes it difficult for me to want to turn the page. So, emotion is always super important, and that's why people don't like info dumps. It's hard to have emotion with an info dump. So I'm drawn towards emotion, and there's certain things that are very difficult to have emotion embedded into when you start that way.
Well, I didn't think I'd have anything else to add, but that's a really good point, especially if it's in some sort of other world, sci-fi, fantasy. It could be in something contemporary, but when I'm reading something particularly, it's like, whoa, that is a lot of new information. There is something to be said for priming the reader for how expansive the world building might be, but at the same time, I would like the reader to feel oriented and comfortable and excited to enter this world, not overwhelmed with how much this is going to require of them, how much investment, and they just need to feel comfortable entering the story before we throw so much of the world building at them.
All right, cool. Liz asked, can you share the moment you knew your person you knew you had to mentor?
So I've been doing this since 2015, and every year it's different. 2015, it was Kristen LaBianca, and I just knew from the voice of the first page that was my mentee, and I was going to fight anyone for it, and I didn't have to, luckily. I scared them all away. Other years it's just been different. It's been going through and just reading more of the story. I tend to like voice. I'm such a voice person, and I think I can help you with plot. I can help you with dialogue. I can help you with, building character, but I can't give you a voice, and so that is the common denominator for me, is if I look at a page and I see that voice from the first paragraph, I'm in love with it. And I'm actually so forgiving of other things later on. So
What she said.
Well, for me, it has been, this will be my third year, and the first 2 years, they were both very different experiences. The first year, there was a submission that I kept a spreadsheet and notes on everything, even though I tend to get a lot of submissions, and I thought I was going to pass on this one, but I kept coming back to it, and then I actually ended up coming back to it. It was like the day before it was all I had to turn in my final pick. So that was one that I had a lot of doubt over, but then I just kept coming back to it. And, but then the one that I got last year, I was going through all the submissions, and then this one, I read it overnight. I thought, this could be published as it is. And, it was a very different opportunity to mentor somebody and feel like they need an opportunity to be showcased and seen. The book is so good. I have a way to help this even better. So, 1 year, it was a very long process and went up to the last minute. I just didn't know. And then another year, almost instantly, I read it overnight and I was ready to contact the author and say, I really would like to mentor you and your book.
I just got really distracted by what was happening behind you, Stephen, and I had to show everyone on a bigger screen.
My dog, she says she likes to make the stuff smell like her feet. Her feet smell like Dog feet smell like corn chips, so I call them her Fritos.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Honestly, like for me, I mean, I this is my third year mentoring. I had 2 mentees in 2018. So I've had 3 so far, and every time it's been something different. Really, like it's very hard to pinpoint. Like voice is definitely what hooks me. Like if it's very voicey from the get-go, that's definitely near like the very top of my list. Like I'll keep a spreadsheet. Well, the only times I will use a spreadsheet is tracking all several hundred of those submissions, and I don't know. It's difficult. Like every year there's been a handful that I have been really interested in, probably about 2 to 3 each time, and I've read them all through the whole way. And it really comes down to, what do I think of this book? Like, what is my vision for this book? And I don't know if we're allowed to talk about this or not, but I'd often email the potential mentee and just ask follow-up questions, because I'm trying to get a sense of if my vision for this book aligns with theirs. And in some cases it hasn't, and that's kind of a bummer, but it makes sense. So it really just comes down to, I guess, me having a solid vision for their book and it being at least similar to their own vision for their book.
Yeah, that I think is the key point, because there's, like I said before, I want something that grabs me. I mean, it's not like I'm getting to pick like the best cookie and then I eat it and then I'm done. It's more involved. We're looking for something that we think that we can help, that we don't like, that we have a vision for. And there's plenty of books that I get that I really, really like, but I don't know that I'm the person to help fix any issues in it. Like they may need world building, and world building isn't my strength. So, that might not be a book that I would choose to mentor, even if I absolutely love it and see a lot of potential in it. So that's like an X factor that mentees really can't predict how that's going to play out, but that's a major factor in the books that I end up choosing.
All right. I remember one year when I was co-mentoring with Lee, she was ahead of me in the reading, and she messaged me and she's like, Sarah, I found the one. And like, if you know me at all, like I'm very independent and I don't like to be told what to do. And I was like, how dare she? And then I go and read it, and like, I literally got chills and I was like, oh my God, she's right. This is the one. And it was like, we read all the other submissions too, but like that one just had like so much, that we wanted to work on. So,
and I had one like Stephen where I didn't think I was going to take it, and then I requested it out of curiosity, and then I kept putting it down, and then I kept going and I kept getting curious about like what would happen next, and I just kept picking it back up and reading it. And I had no intention that I was going to mentor it, and then by the time I got done, I had so many ideas, and I ended up mentoring that manuscript, and it literally was not anywhere near the top until I just kept going and going and going. And once I got hooked into it, I was done.
Yeah. And sometimes you read something and you're like, this is great, but I don't know what to do with it. And so you can't mentor it, even though you think it's a great book. Shanks asks, what do you look for in an opening? Kellye doesn't want to say because it is genre specific.
Well, I have something that's genre independent, and that for me is that I need some sort of emotional hook. I need something that immediately connects me to the character and their motivation for whatever is about to happen next, for whatever decision they're about to make and whatever story is about to unfold. I need some sort of emotional hook to carry me into turning the pages. For me, even when it's just a question of the concept, what I'm really asking is, are you presenting me with something that immediately makes me care enough to keep turning the pages?
Yep, Stephen stole my answer.
It's for me and my genre, I do want to connect with the character, but I just tend to prefer jumping into like a scene versus like an like inside their head. That it just works for me. Not saying there are books that work that are inside your head, but I prefer to just be in the middle of a scene and kind of getting to know that character through that scene and their actions and reactions to whatever is going on. You know, and I don't, like they were saying earlier, I'm not a big fan of a lot of info dumping and background right away. So I prefer to kind of have that sparsed out a little bit. I always say I know sometimes I see also people don't put their character's name in right away, and I want to know what the name of the character is pretty quickly. So
I think it goes back to showing and not telling on the first pages. I mean, you don't want to be telling too much anyway, but in the first pages, if you're telling me what your story is, or you're giving me a lot of background right up front, that's probably not going to be as engaging as what, like Kellye said. Just get us into some action, get us into something that's happening, so that we can immerse ourselves in the world and see who these people are and how they interact with their environment.
The only thing I had to add was, if you're doing a first-person narrator, try to find a way to give us their name and their gender, if appropriate, somewhere very quick, because I don't like not knowing for 2 or 3 chapters whose head I'm in, you know, and that can be something that if you're not careful, you miss.
Yeah, I was just talking to some people the other day about why people hate first person so much, and I think that might be part of it. Is if that if that first chapter doesn't have like interaction with someone else who says their name, like that can be a problem. Mike Mammy is in the chat. All right. Catherine asks a really good question. Any suggestions for fighting self-doubt as a writer? Everyone's like, no, I don't know how to do it.
If you have any, please let me know.
Well, so I got hit with this question by a writer, one of the writers I'm working with otherwise. And I think it's, to me, I think, well, I'll tell you what works for me and what I've started to share with other people. And that is to take an honest assessment of where you're at in your career and where your skills are at, where your storytelling is at, what you've done, not the accolades that have been given to you. Kellye, you can just nod. Is it okay if I tell a brief story that involved you? Okay, thanks. It won't be embarrassing, I promise. So there was just this one time where Kellye, she was being brave on Twitter, and she posted a brief section of her work in progress. And I saw it, and I've read Kellye's stuff before. She's a great writer, but even reading this thing that she was being vulnerable enough to share, I said, holy shit, you can write. I hope it's okay that I said that. And she came back and said, you know, coming from you, that means a lot. And it just brought things into perspective in a way that I think is good for all of us to take a second and appreciate that you may feel like you have no value where you are, that you don't have any skills, that you haven't accomplished anything that means anything to anyone, not even yourself. But there are people around you who yearn for where you're at, who think you're capable of things that they don't know that they'll ever be capable of. So sometimes it is having some sort of kind of publishing accomplishment, that you've had a book published, you've won an award, or you've sold something. But it's also that you may be at a point in your storytelling process with your craft and your voice that other people admire more than you realize. And they wish that they could be as good at it as you are. And I think that, yes, you may have things that you still want to achieve or growth opportunities, but those don't mean that you don't currently have value that's worth seeing and being honest about and appreciating. Not just about yourself, because other people may appreciate that about you and you just don't know it.
Yeah, kind of. Go ahead.
Sorry. First, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that, Stephen. I think for me, I tend to, like, as people know, like, I have really bad short-term memory. So I forget how hard the other books are. Like, I forget how hard the first one was and the second one was. And like, I just think about how, like, this is it and it's perfect, but this took like years and tons of drafts and things like that. And so I'm like working on that work in progress still. And I'm like, why would anyone want to read this? It sucks. But I have to remind myself, just keep writing and it will get better. You know, so I think even with that self-doubt, just try to fight through it and just keep writing and realizing it's going to get better. And the same thing, realize that every author, I can guarantee you, like, every author that you love probably has self-doubt and probably is also sitting at their computer going, this sucks. Why would anyone want to write it? Buy this, you know, I want to read this. But they just kept going. So.
Yeah, I found I teach a
kind of
lot of
going.
writers conference.
Stephen had said.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'll go ahead. Going off of what Stephen had said, the biggest thing I've found to help with those feelings of self-doubt is finding a community. Like, and for me, that's been pitchwars. Like, even before I got in, I entered back in 2015, got no requests, like nothing at all. But I connected with people on the hashtag. I found critique partners from the hashtag that I still talk to today. And like, these people will bolster you up. I mean, they will be the people who, like, they will cheer you on. They will help you refine your craft, which will make you a better writer. But like I said, they cheer you on. They will eagerly attack you and harass you for more chapters if it's something they really want to read or if it's something they're interested in. So just having that sort of like support network is incredibly helpful. And you don't need to be selected for pitchwars for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The only
Leslie?
thing I would add is accept it, and it's not going anywhere. No matter how many books you publish, no matter how many awards you get. There's a story about Neil Gaiman meeting Neil Armstrong. I can't remember exactly what it is, but at the highest levels of achievement, writers still have self-doubt. So it's not going anywhere. So I think just make your peace with it. Community, I echo what Ian says, community helps me. I have a mastermind every week with 2 other writers. And, you know, when I'm down, they're like, okay, Leslie, you're being unreliable. And this is why, you know, that you can do this and you've done this X number of times before. So having those people to pull you back up and just knowing that you're going to go through it again. And that's just how this works.
And I think it's also really important and impossible, but important to try not to compare yourself with other writers, because you have your own unique way of writing, and your what you have to give in your voice and what you want to say is not going to be the same thing as other people do. So it's hard to, like, sometimes you'll read a book and you'll go, I could never do that, but you don't need to do that. You need to do your own thing. And once you know, if you just push through and get the words on the page, then you have more to work with, and it snowballs. And then you end up holding a book like Kellye and saying, it's perfect. It is. It is. Look at that. Oh, so
With
pretty.
her Anthony Award behind her too.
Award-winning out there, Kellye.
Well, if I could just add briefly, the thing that I think about with this topic is something that Patton Oswalt said in that recent documentary, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, about Michelle McNamara, because he says at the when Michelle is nearing ending writing her book, and she feels so overwhelmed with doubt and fear that it's, you know, I mean, at this point she's acclaimed for what she's done, you know, but she's still filled with doubt about this is not going to be any good. And Patton Oswalt, you know, the comedian, he says something like this: you have to realize this is the point that everyone hits at this point in the draft, when they're at the verge of creating something truly great in their life. Of course it feels hard, because it's a new exploration for you. It's new and it's bold. Of course it's hard, but this is the time when you need to accept that sometimes you're just putting in the work, and it will be worth it when you're done.
Yeah. I think self-doubt is like a useful tool for most writers, because I was saying at local writers conferences, there are a couple people who don't seem to have any self-doubt, and those are the same people that don't seem to improve year after year. So yeah. And I love all the talk about community. We talked about it a lot on Friday too. I mean, like Kellye, I talk to Kellye every day. She's one of, you know, my best writing friends. Steven is always there to give me advice. Like, everyone's just like, I don't know. It's just like, makes me all soft-hearted for once. All right. And Anushi asked, any advice on preparing a standout submission package with such tough competition?
Read the wish lists.
That's true.
My coffee is still currently taking donations. Just make sure that it can't be tracked back to you.
Steven.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. That's a joke. I promise it's a joke.
We also have, I should mention, on the blog, the query workshops are going on right now. So every day the Pitchwars blog is posting 2 to 3 query critiques from one of our mentors, and so you can learn a lot. I mean, I learned so much about query writing from the Query Shark blog in the old days. And granted, she's much more snarky than our mentors are going to be, but just reading critiques of other people's queries, because then you can remove yourself like emotionally from it, and just learn. And when it's not your own query that's being critiqued.
I want to echo what Marianne said. Definitely read the wish list. I think I in my head, I think every year someone creates a spreadsheet where they just mark off what people want, and they always mark it off wrong, because I'd be like, do not give me this. And then I get this. And I'm like, you just wasted one of your 4 choices on me because you didn't listen, or not listen or read, or, or maybe you thought you could take a chance or whatever, just because someone marked it, or maybe a couple of years ago I took this, but I know, and it's a pain. I did that too. I think my year in 2014, they didn't even separate it by age category. Like, so back in my day, I actually had to go through each and every one.
We had more mentors then.
Yeah. So it was like, so I just take time and go through it. It's great because you get to know these people and you can really see who you think might be a good fit for you. So
I would add, sort of on the line of the critique posts, there's that Pitchwars forum that was set up a while back, where you can post your query, you can post your synopsis, you can post various parts of your first chapter, and sometimes mentors will pop in to offer feedback, but the other Pitchwars hopefuls will pop in, and you will learn a lot by critiquing someone else's work, because you will see, it's much easier to see something that is being done wrong in someone else's work than in your own, if you haven't mastered that sort of like introspective, because you'll go and you will learn, like, you're putting em dashes everywhere and you should be using periods, or you should be using commas. It's like, oh no, I do that too. I need to fix that in my own.
All I'll disagree with is that I would reverse that and add as many em dashes as possible.
I agree. I use those everywhere. I regretted that sentence as soon as I said it, because I use em dashes all the time.
I'm a huge fan of them. I'll take as many of them as anyone wants to give me. If you want to wow me in your query letter and your first pages, that's halfway a joke.
He's actually looking for a romance between an em dash and a semicolon.
That would be a great concept. Well, how high concept? Instant bestseller.
Think of the conflict.
This is not wish list, so no one take this too seriously, but wouldn't it be fun to have some sort of romance about people who are, their opposites attract, enemies to lovers, because they're both so serious about grammar, but they both believe in totally different grammar rules.
Oxford
right?
comma freaks.
Oxford comma,
like
right?
one of them
Yes.
wants the Oxford comma, and one of them says never.
Chicago Manual versus MLA.
Yes!
I would read that all day.
All right.
It was a murder.
We're almost done, so we gotta pull it back in. What's a good, EW Paris asks, what's a good word count for a query? And it's going to vary on genre too.
250 to 350.
Yeah, for adult fantasy, I've always seen like 250 to 300 words for the meat of the query. That doesn't count the like statistics or your personalization or your bio, but just what you have about the plot. Should be about 250 to 300, or better yet, 200 to 250 if you can squeeze it down there.
I always say as short as it can be with still being compelling.
Yeah, sure. Get to the point. I don't want to open a query letter and essentially be looking at a shortened synopsis. Just hook me, tell me a little bit. What is it? Eric Smith has a great post about it. He says the hook, the cook, and something else. But well, now I'm giving him short shrift. But anyway, Eric Smith has a great article on it.
The hook, the cook, and the book?
That's it. Thank you. Oh, I forgot the book. That's the most important part.
All right. So we are almost out of time. We're still waiting on the two other mentors who are going to be joining us to come in. I saw Janet popped in, but then she popped out. So if you're watching, Janet, feel free to come back in. Ian's got to give us one more look at that mug. All right. So if each of you could just tell us like where we can find you online, if you have any books that you want to promote or anything you want to promote, now is the time to do that. And I also have your Twitter handles that I'm going to put on the screen as well. Go ahead.
My website is maryannmarlowe.com. My Twitter is there. I have an AMA on the forum if you want to go dig through the discussions. I'm on Facebook. I think it's Marlowe Marianne. And I have a book coming out on Tuesday called Kind of a Big Deal. I had a book come out in July called Crushing It.
My website is lpenelope.com. Earthsinger Chronicles is my series. This is the third book. It came out a few weeks ago, Cry of Metal and Bone. Should probably start at the beginning with Song of Blood and Stone. And yeah, my Twitter is there. I'm mostly on Instagram, but I'm on Twitter sometimes. But I'm on Deadline now, so I'm not anywhere.
Yeah, my website is just same as my Twitter handle, iambarnes.com. If you got questions, you can probably reach me on Twitter. That's the easiest way. Beyond that, I don't have anything else I could talk about. So.
Okay, well, you can. Oh, sorry, Kellye. Okay.
I already promoted my books 500 times, but here they are one more time. The Detective by Day series, so lightweight, funny mystery series. My email, look at my email address. My website is kellyegarrett.com, and that's KELLYEGARRETT, and then Kellye Kells, I think everything. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So.
Okay, well, and you can see my Twitter handle, Steven_edits, and then my website is one word, StevenEdits.com, and I got to, you can go there and see all the stuff I think about writing advice, and also if you want some help with a writing coach or editor for yourself. Otherwise, looking forward to seeing everybody during Pitch Wars.
All right. So y'all have about, let me look at the clock, 2 more minutes. So is there any parting words of wisdom any of you would like to offer?
Just know I did not share my wish list at all. Just want to put that out there. Thank you. I'm going to mute myself now before I do.
It's so hard to figure out.
I would say, I would just say, if you're on the fence about trying Pitch Wars, go for it. There's literally no downside. So why not?
I think that, longevity in the industry. So if you try and you don't get picked this year, keep going, because once you're published, one book, the longevity will be necessary. So practice. You're going to get rejected all throughout this the process, even once you've published books. So yes, it's nice to practice now. It's nice to get in and also keep going even if you don't, would be my advice.
Yeah, I was going to echo Ian. Just definitely, if you're thinking about it, you should give it a go. I mean, it's a bit of a waiting period, and that's the only downside you have is that you'll be waiting. But that's part of publishing, so get used to that.
Yeah, I think Sarah said that earlier, that we kind of try to mimic the process of agenting and trying the publishing process. So I say you do it now and get used to it and learn how you handle things and make your mistakes. Do it now versus with your agent or with your editor or with whoever else. So
yeah.
I would just say don't disqualify yourself. If this is an experience that you want to have, give yourself the opportunity and submit. Don't let yourself worry that you're not worthy of it, that your book and your craft is not valuable enough. Let the mentors decide whether it's the right book and you're the right person for them to mentor, but don't start off by thinking that you're not worthy of submitting. Don't disqualify yourself.
All right, that's great. Thank y'all for joining us today and answering everyone's questions. Most of these mentors will be doing Twitter chats coming up. So I think Lee can give us the link for that in the comments with all the schedule. And then some of you are also doing second video chats, I think, too. And so after the 12th, they'll be able to talk about their wish list. So if you want to come back and check those out. Thank y'all and have a good night. I'm going to put myself full screen while y'all sign out, and we'll see you around. All right. We are going to bring on our second set of mentors in just a second. And I'll do a couple of reminders before we do that. Let's see. They can't answer any wish list or genre questions, anything like tropes that they like or anything like that. So the wish list come out on September 12th, and they're not allowed to talk about their wish list before then. So feel free to come back. Like I said, most of them will be doing Twitter chats and other video chats after the 12th if you want to ask about wish lists. If you're watching on Twitter or somewhere else and you want to click through and participate in the chat, if you go over to YouTube, that's where you're going to find where the questions are and everything like that. And submissions open on September 27th. So we're going to have each of the mentors introduce themselves one by one. We're going to start with Sonia. And then we'll bring on Gwynne and Janet, and hopefully Paris will join us in a minute. And so just a heads up to the mentors, so you know what order you're going in. And so take it away, Sonia.
Hi, I'm Sonia Hartl. I'm the managing director this year for Pitchwars, and I'm also mentoring adult this year. I haven't mentored adult since 2015, so this will be fun. I'm mentoring with Annette Christie, who was one of my mentees in 2016. And we've been co-mentors since 2017. So we work really well together, and I'm excited to be back with her.
All right, we're going to bring on Gwynne.
Hi, everyone. First things first, it's a foggy day here, and I'm right by the water, so I can't control the foghorns you might hear in the background. I'm Gwynne, and I'm very happy to be back for my second year mentoring. You can find me at allthekissing.com and on WordPress, and I don't have a whole lot more to say right now. So.
And Janet?
Hi, I'm Janet Walden-West, and Ann Raven and I will be mentoring for our second year. Ann is not with us. She's in South Africa, so she's asleep right now. But we're looking forward to all of the submissions.
All right, great. Welcome, everyone. I didn't realize we have a lot of romance writers on today's chat. I'm not going to say what they're taking in their submissions, but we do have a lot of people who write romance here. Especially when Paris joins us. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive into questions. We're still on questions that were asked 50 minutes ago, so we're trying to get through as many as we can. So we have a question from Marco. How important is social media interaction for an author before being published, like having a bunch of followers? Oh, and Paris is here, so actually I'm going to have Paris introduce herself before we answer that question.
Hi, I'm Paris Wynters. Oh, geez, I missed the first part. I'm a romance author. I have 3 books published. One just came out in September by Thule Publishing. I'm not sure what else.
Oh, your Pitchwars history.
My Pitchwars history. This is my 3rd year mentoring. I have mentored 2 times in the past. My first year, I actually had 2 mentees.
All right, great. Welcome. All right, so back to Marco's question. How important is social media interaction for an author before being published?
I would say not at all, unless you're publishing nonfiction and they want you to have a platform. But for fiction, I don't think, I mean, maybe your publisher will want you to get Twitter and Instagram and that, but it's not something that's required. You don't have to have much followers. And yeah, I mean, we see book deals being announced all the time with people that have, 100 followers, 50 followers. It's fiction is totally different.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. So Elizabeth asked a specific question, but I'm actually going to ask y'all to broaden it. So she asked, are comps within the last 5 years a must do, or can you go older? But feel free to just talk about like what makes a good comp in general, because I know we always get questions about that. So people are always interested in that.
Okay. Go ahead, Sarah.
I had recently taken a class and had done a mentorship, and I really got to understand how comps were used. I would say when not on the agent end, but on the publishing end, one of the things they do with comps is they go into a particular website where they can actually pull comps, and it's usually within the past 2 to 3 years, and they pull up the sales and stuff like that, and that's sometimes how a publisher will decide if that's a book that they might look at and what kind of offer that they might make. On the agenting side, I've heard different things. I'd say, comps within the past 5 years, you're looking to grab, attention. Sometimes, a movie or TV show works. I've heard, that stuff grabbing interest. Especially, I think they're remaking some movies that were like old Westerns, I guess, and they're trying to bring that back. And I've heard of some book deals actually going through that were comping, those upcoming movies.
I'm just going to agree with what Paris said. I think that as far as querying, which is probably what a lot of you are asking about, you don't have to have comps, and if you do choose them, be very thoughtful. And it really helps if you can say XX comp has the voice of and married to this with the pacing of. Give a just a specific reason instead of just like tossing it out there, which I see a lot in my genres.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, that your comps don't have to be, my book is exactly like the plot of this book, but you can say stylistically it will appeal to readers of this author or of that particular book, and that broadens your scope a lot. You don't have so much tension as a querier trying to figure out exactly which author you're most like, because none of us are exactly like any other author.
Okay. I remember we did a Pitch Wars live event at ADP one year, and we had talked about comps for a while because people had a lot of questions about them. And then we critiqued queries, and this guy had asked me if only having James Joyce as his comp was a problem, and I said, yeah, kind of. It makes it seem like you haven't read anything since James Joyce. And he said, well, I haven't. I don't like anything that's being published right now. And I was like, yeah, that's a problem. So yeah. All right. So we had a question about science fiction, but unfortunately our science fiction mentor was in the earlier hour. So I would suggest that you find Ian at one of the Twitter chats, or any of our science fiction mentors on Twitter, and ask them about the science fiction market, because I don't think we have anyone who's really familiar with it right here. Do we? Am I wrong?
I read a little, but I know Ian, so.
Yeah, definitely find our science fiction mentors. I mean, our mentors who write science fiction, since you don't know what they're taking, but you can probably figure some of it out. Yeah, but Mike and Ian are probably going to be two of your best resources for that on Twitter, and they're both open to answering questions on Twitter too. Camille asks, what are your opinions on epistolary novels in unique formats like journals, emails, etc.? And like, not whether, I guess you personally will be taking them, since you can't answer that question, but just in general.
I actually really like them. Right now I'm reading This Is How You Lose the Time War, and that's epistolary. And so I think if it's done properly, they're really great. They're great.
Yeah, I think it's like anything else. If you do it well, that's all that matters.
All right. I just messaged Kellye and Brenda a question for the next question because I can't remember a number right now. So we talked earlier about the publishing call article about synopsis, and Susan did link it in the comments at 12:15. So if you want to scroll up and grab that, feel free to do that. All right. So Kellye answered me, so I can ask this question now. Karen asked how many people normally apply for the adult mentoring, and how many on average are taken on. So I can answer that question real quick. We had right around 3,500 to 3,700 total submissions last year, including all categories. And adult was about, Sonia, correct me if I'm wrong, I think around 42%, 44% of that. And so if you can do that math real quick, you can figure that out. And then we have about 45-ish last year adult mentors. And so whatever that math is, I know I'm usually the math person, but I don't, I'm doing many things right now. But it turned out to be around 3%, basically 3% of the people who applied got in. Yeah, so there you go. If you're planning a multi-book series, how much of it do you recommend should be written before searching for an agent?
I would say if you're writing multi-book series, just make sure the first one is done. That's it. And make sure it can stand. I mean, you don't have to, but generally recommended that it will stand alone.
It does help, yes. Anybody else want to comment on that? All right, that's a good question, because I do see people in kind of like in our local area who are like, oh, I need to write the first 3 books of this series before I start pitching an agent. But then if that series doesn't sell, that's like a lot of time that you've spent on a book that isn't going to sell. Oh, this is an interesting question. While querying, is it better to try different genres until you find the one that hits, or try to develop a series? I feel like most people gravitate towards genres naturally.
Yeah, that one's, I would say all that really matters is what do you enjoy writing in. And if you have multiple genres that you're interested in, that might be the time to sit down and look at what the market is doing at the moment, what might be kind of forecast for the future to help decide what you want to query. But you're going to be spending a lot of time with whatever manuscript, so it should really be something you love.
Yeah, you really have to write to your passion. If you write to the market, you're probably going to always be playing catch up because the market shifts so quickly. So when you say keep trying different genres until you find one that hits, that's good advice for yourself, not necessarily for querying. You have to write the stuff that you love, and you have to be passionate about it, and you have to love it enough so that you're going to want to take the time out of your life to try and sell it too.
Yeah, and if there are multiple genres that you're drawn towards, I know like me, like I read, well, I guess back when I started writing, I read adult science fiction and fantasy as much as I read young adult. But I did just kind of feel a little more pull in the young adult area. But that doesn't mean that later you can't branch out. Like Sonia is publishing in young adult and adult, and several people are. So, but it does help to focus on one at the beginning. All right, Jennifer asked thoughts on prologues. I've seen many articles suggesting that prologues are a turnoff for agents, but having one saves me from info dumping. Backstory later. Are prologues really that bad?
I am just going to say that last year from our submissions, the majority of prologues that we saw fell into the not really necessary category. something that Anne and I have both done, putting down information that you need to write your story, but that is not actually key to starting your story off.
I agree. I've also had seen places in prologues where, there are bits of good information, but, it could actually be weaved into a story more organically later on. Especially like, there are things that can come up in, dialogue or in romance, some of that backstory or some of the stuff that might be in prologue would actually be, a key moment between the two love interests where it should, actually occur later in this, come up in a different way where it could like really bond. But I've also seen a couple of prologues that actually worked really well. So I'd say the majority can actually be weaved in throughout, like little bits and pieces throughout the story.
I'll also add that info dumping in a prologue is still info dumping. So if it's not compelling, then it is probably being used just to throw down a bunch of information, and it will read that way too. So it's really going to depend on how it's done as well.
Yeah, I think the best advice I ever got as far as prologues and loading the beginning of your story heavily with basically backstory is to think of it as like a piece of glass and then just shatter it and see what pieces you actually need at the beginning and what you can just sprinkle in to the rest of the story.
I also think that there are some genres that lend themselves a little bit better to prologues than others, but I wouldn't say that that's a hard and fast rule. And most of what I saw last year in submissions with prologues, definitely that information could have been used better later on in the story or used in a different way that didn't feel like, often prologues feel to me like they're pretty heavy-handed ways of just saying, here's my setting and you must understand this. And that's fine. I want to understand it and I want to know your setting, but I like to not have it told to me. I want to learn it as I go along.
Yeah, I think the reason why there is such a dislike of prologues from like agents and editors is because so many of them are unnecessary. And you see a lot of great prologues in published books, but you have to remember that's like survivorship bias. Like you're seeing the ones that have survived because they are good. All right, Catherine asks, when it comes to synopsis, my novel has 2 timelines and they intersect. How do you suggest structuring that in a synopsis? How would you write a synopsis for like The Witcher? Because that has 2 timelines. Don't act like y'all haven't seen it.
I would just write one paragraph for one timeline, and the next paragraph for the next timeline, and the next paragraph for the next timeline, and back and forth. If they switch off and on like that, or if it starts in the past and then ends up in the end in the second half, write it linear that way, or just write it how it shows in the story. Like take your synopsis, write one sentence about each chapter, and there you go. That's what you got.
Yeah, and I think mostly the problem, sticking point with multiple timelines is how you segue from one to the other in your synopsis. As long as you can connect each paragraph that you have, it's going to flow.
And I think also it's a little bit like writing a synopsis with a book that's got a dual POV where you can either switch back and forth, or you can say up front, this has a dual timeline. In timeline A, blah, 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 blah. In timeline B, blah, da, 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 da. And you can get it done that way too.
Yeah. I mean, you can also, I would suggest looking at, even though it's maybe not your genre, looking at synopses for thrillers if you can find them, because a lot of times thrillers, they don't have alternating timelines, but they have different locations and storylines that end up intersecting. And so it's very similar because you're like, in at Langley, blah, blah, blah. And in Syria, this is happening, that kind of thing. And you see them switch back and forth. All right. So we have a pantser versus plotter question. What are your opinions on outline versus, I'm not going to say that word, versus pantsing? So what are your thoughts on that? Are you pantser or plotter, each of you?
I'm a pantser, but
Plotter.
I sometimes have to plot because if I sell book on proposal, I have to plot it before I sell it. So I would prefer not to do that. I would prefer to just open up a blank document and see where it goes.
I'm kind of the opposite, because when I started out, all of mine was off the cuff, pantsing it as you go. And I spent a lot of time blocked because I had gotten characters into situations that I had no idea how to get them out of. So now I'm a hardcore plotter. We're talking like 14 or 15 pages before I start, because it saves me the frustration, and wanting to walk away from the story when, you're stuck in the middle, which no one loves anyway. But that's one of those things, whatever will work best for you.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to stare down an open page and not know what's going to happen. But I call it soft plotting. I like to know the beginning, the middle, and the end. And how they get there, that can happen organically. I don't do the 15-page plots. I don't do that kind of thing. And I'll let it take me where it goes. But I think that there's something, for me anyway, that's really exhilarating to be a pantser and just say, wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. That's really fun. And then see how I can craft it toward what I had in mind.
I'm a hardcore plotter, just like Janet. 15, 20 pages, details lined out in every chapter. It just works for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even if you're plotting, you can still go a little off script, or as you're writing, go, oh, this would be perfect in here, and add to it. You're not stuck with it. So I just like structure.
I love this because it was like the real answer to the question is whatever works for you. Find what works for you and do it. Because everyone does it a little bit differently. We talked about on Friday night, I always say Nora Roberts is a pantser, and that's fine. Like, if it works for her, it works for me, right? And then someone said that they knew about an instance where Nora Roberts had to submit a synopsis for something. And she's like, okay, I can have it to you in 2 weeks. And so instead she just wrote the whole book and then wrote the synopsis, because she literally just could not do it. Which is what I used to do in school, is I would write the entire essay when the outline was due, because that's how my brain works. So whatever works best for you. All right. Jay asked, do you have any tips for writing that hooky one-liner that's used in a picture query, sometimes called a logline? How do you hook the reader without risking sounding cliche or corny?
I would say pick out the element of your story that makes it unique, that makes it stand out, and build your pitch around that. And that usually helps you avoid sounding cliche.
Mm-hmm. And checking out, IMDb for the pitch lines for movies and TV shows. That really helped me understand the format, the structure for a good logline or pitch too.
I also really like going to bookstores and just reading the back copy, because that's where all the log lines are. And you pick the genre that you're writing, and you just grab a bunch of books off the shelf and see how they do their log line. It's really illuminating.
You could also go through, you could also go through the PitMad thing and see, because Twitter, you got to really boil that down to only so many characters. So go through the PitMad feed and see how people are pitching their books, and that helps a lot too.
And I was just going to say, going off of what Gwynne had said, you can go on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles and actually look at that stuff too. So there's a lot of resources, and just make it unique to your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you avoid, the vague, a decision that will change her life kind of wording, that you'll avoid a lot of feeling cliched.
Yeah, I do agree. Specificity is key. And also, if you just can't find one, can't come up with one that you don't hate, you don't have to have a logline for a query. Unless, of course, there's a submission form that requires it for an agent or something. But yeah. Shanks asks, how do you feel about queries that try something out of the box to get your attention? Do you prefer people to follow the format? I will say, just on my experience from being a slush reader, never ever write a serial killer query in first person. Thank you.
I mean, queries have a format for a reason, because it tells you enough about the book to get your interest. And so if you're going to do things like add graphics or use Comic Sans as a font, or, tell the query from first person rather than third person point of view, I'm going to think that you probably didn't do enough research to know how to write a proper query. That's just my opinion on it. But when you see so many of them, you get to see the ones that work and the ones that don't. And the ones that try and be cute or try and do something that's just completely different that you would not expect to see in a query might be good for a giggle. But unless they really highlight what you're doing in your book, it's probably better to stick with the standard format.
Yeah.
I've heard that in agent inboxes too, 90% of the queries try gimmicks or try something to stand out like that. So if 10% are doing the correct format, you're actually standing out by doing, known formats for queries.
Yeah, when you try anything kind of gimmicky like that, you really do risk coming across as less than knowledgeable about your genre, about this as a potential career, and it can turn off a lot of agents.
I think one of it. So it's funny because like the query that stands out to me the most of all the queries I've read, and I've read thousands, is Wade Albert White, who I think was a Pitchwars mentor or mentee a couple years ago, middle grade novel, and it was just like so full of humor. But the book was so humorous, but it still followed all the conventions, all the format. It was just like extremely voicey. And so you can still stay in the format and also stand out. Lee asked, how many submissions do you guys get on average? So I will say it can vary from mentor to mentor, from about 30 to about 300. So it varies very widely depending on the genres that they're accepting, and the narrowness or broadness of their wish list. I don't know if y'all have anything to add to that, but Elizabeth asked a question. This is another one that's specific, but I'm going to ask you to broaden your answers as well. But what percentage of partials or fulls do you request from the work submitted to you? And the way I'm going to ask you to broaden it is maybe you can just talk about kind of like your process of going through the submission inbox, what that looks like, and what what kind of things you do there.
With Ann and I last year, we just went down the list of submissions and we read, the query first and the first pages and the synopsis for every entry. And Ann loves spreadsheets. She's the logical one that keeps us on track. And so we just went through and marked, our yes, maybe, definitely, and kind of went from there. We didn't have a target that we wanted to hit as far as percentages, what we would take time for, what we didn't have time for.
For Annette and I, we share brains, so it works out well for us. We generally, Annette does the spreadsheet. She's much more organized than I am, and she'll just mark off ones that are yes or maybe. And if it's maybe, it's ones that we'll both go back through and take a look at. And if it's yes, we'll request. We don't have a set number or set percentage that we'll stop at. Like we don't say, oh, we'll only request 10 or we'll only request 20. We don't do that. We just, if we like it, we request it. And then until we're done, and then we move on from there and read another one. So it's a very informal process, though.
I read and request as I go along, and I read all of my submissions. Last year I read them all 3 times to make sure I wasn't missing anything, because I figure if somebody's going to take the time to submit to me, I want to make sure that I spend the time considering what they have to offer. But I think for me it ended up being about 10 or 15% request rate, and I requested right up until the last week of submissions being considered. So it's if it strikes me as something that I want to read, then I'll ask to read it. And I do keep a spreadsheet. This is the one time that I'm a plotter. I keep the spreadsheet and I make notes on it, and have reasons for yeses and nos on all of them.
Yes.
I do the same thing. I'll read through the query, the synopsis, first pages, in-depth spreadsheets, color-coded, the whole, I try to be like Marianne, but I'm probably nowhere near. But yeah, a lot of in-depth notes, a lot of columns, and I do the same. I kind of request as I go along if something catches my interest. Even if it's a maybe, I'll go back, I'll reread, and I just request throughout.
Yeah. I think with Ann and I, we were just looking for reasons to say yes and request too. So.
All right. Yeah, Marianne's spreadsheets are legendary. Okay, so I finally found another question. I had to scroll through. Mike Mammy joined the chat around 12:30, 12:40, and the chat just like went somewhere. So it took me a while to find another question. So I'm glad y'all took a while to answer that question. So Kaylee asks, what is your one solid piece of advice for first year pitchwars submitters?
Go for it. I remember myself when I used to submit there, and I've seen, through Twitter, there's always that self-doubt. And I think, no matter where you are in your writing career, you're always going to have that. So if you have everything that's needed, go ahead and submit, try it. There's really, you can't go wrong, and interact definitely with the community. You'll find a lot of great CPs, just people in general that are at the, that are there to support you, because you do need that.
Yeah, definitely on the community. I mean, engage. That is where I found a lot of my critique partners. That's where Ann and I found each other right before Pitchwars in 2017. And if you can swap pages, notes, anything like that, that will help you polish up your submission. Plus, it is nice just to have a group of peers that understand what you're going through and are kind of in the same place. The support and the cheerleading is just as important as any of, the technical things like setting up your query letter and coming up with a log line.
Yeah, mine is the same, along as Janet and Paris's community. Swap chapters. Get out there, say, hey, does anybody want to do chapter swaps? Does anybody want to do synopsis swaps? My alpha critique partner has been my critique partner for years. We met on the Pitchwars hashtag when we were both hopefuls in 2013, and we still are still very close. So you never know who you're going to meet on the hashtag. I'd say 99% of my writing friends have come from Pitchwars, interacting with Pitchwars. It's great to build your community there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely take advantage of everything that you can. If you have questions, there's always the Ask Mentor chats, and you can ask each other. It doesn't have to be a mentor that gives you an answer. Mm-hmm. Use the forum. There's a lot of great stuff going on there. And the best thing you can do is just make yourself part of the community and not self-reject from the beginning. Just use what's there for you.
And I think the other thing that's great too about the community is that you have writers and authors across genres, and each genre has its own, you know, pros and things that those authors are great at. Like for me, I'd say I, you know, will ask sci-fi writers that I know, hey, can you check out this world building for me? I'm a little weak on it. I'm not sure if I got it right. You have access to all that stuff. So if there are areas that you feel that, you know, your eye, your editing may be a little bit on the weaker side, ask, you know, somebody in a different genre who might, you know, be an expert at that because their genre requires it, to, you know, look at a couple of pages. And I think there's so much that we can learn from just spreading out and, you know, looking, you know, I'm a romance writer, but I read other, I love sci-fi, I love fantasy, I love thrillers. And I actually have some CPs that are in those different genres, and the information and the insight that they give me into some of my manuscripts is just something that I'm so grateful for.
Yeah. All right. So Karen asked a question that y'all can't answer because it's, I think it would be delving into wish list territory. So I'm going to generalize the question. Many of you are romance writers or readers. I think all of you might be actually. How do you feel about romance that doesn't have a happy for now or happily ever after?
If it doesn't have an HEA, it's not a romance.
Yeah.
That's bottom line.
Yeah. If
Or happy for now is fine. But if it doesn't have one of the two, it's not a romance.
Mhm. I think there was a little confusion that we noticed in submissions last year where people weren't sure if they were writing women's fiction or romance, and, you know, your happy ever after or happy for now, and the love story being the central part of the story. If you took the relationship out, then there was no book. So, yeah.
All right. Yes. So yeah. So if you have a romance that doesn't have an HA, then it's not a romance. It's a love story, basically, is what some people refer to it. It's mainly what Nicolas Sparks writes.
I mean, there is such a thing as mainstream fiction
Yeah.
with a central relationship or central romance. It doesn't have to be, you know, a romance novel to have a romantic relationship in it. So.
Right. And if you're just including romantic elements in other genres, then, you know, that's wide open.
Right.
I don't know if y'all know this market very well, so we'll ask the question. Feel free, if you don't know it, just say, I'm not sure. Is it hard to sell a women's fiction novel with spiritual elements?
Yeah. The closest that I can come is inspirational romance, which is a little bit different. So.
Yeah. I think it limits your market somewhat, right? Because like, especially depending on how strong those elements are, you may be selling mainly to Christian publishers if it's like really strong, which is a smaller market, but still a very, very strong market. All right, so we are almost caught up on questions. So if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. But I have this question from Beth. How important is the title of the book at the submission stage?
I don't think we really paid much attention to titles. I mean, and that is something that your agent may have you change. That is something publisher may have you change. So just as long as you have something up there, I think you're okay.
Yeah, titles change constantly in publishing. I've had 2 of mine change out of 4 books published. So it's well, they're not all published yet, but title changes, 4 title changes, or 2 title changes in 4 books. So yeah, it's common. It happens, and it's not a big deal. So it's not a big deal when it goes out with title, as long as it has a title. It's not just, you know, called untitled, unless that's pertaining to your plot. So that's it.
Yeah, I had I've never titled my own book. So there's that. I've had 6 books published between YA and romance. So I don't think it's important. Like, I literally submitted Keeping Your Secret to my editor on the second round of edits with like untitled Sarah Nicolas. So there you go. So Lodestar had asked this question of the earlier mentors, but yeah, I think it would be great to get y'all's input as well. What makes Pitch Wars fun for you?
The community. I mean, it's not just, jumping into submissions and trying to find something awesome that we love that we can help with, which is great. The community is just a lot of fun. Writing can be, kind of a lonely occupation, and this is a great way to find your people.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that gets the most joy out of life when I'm helping other people. So that's what makes Pitch Wars fun for me. It's just a way of giving back. And like Janet said, the community is fantastic, both behind the scenes and what you see on social media or on the blog and all of that stuff. It's a really great opportunity. And also, one of the most fun things about it for me is that with every submission that I read, I learn something about my own taste and my own writing, and that's a real gift that I just can't overstate.
Yeah, and back when we were mentees too, it's a lot of fun to root for your friends that are also submitting, I think. And sometimes you get more excited if you see their name on the list than if you had seen yours.
It's just so much fun to help out and to share like knowledge and stuff that until, let's say, you get an agent or until your first book's published, like there's stuff that you don't know, and then all of a sudden like you find out, and some of that stuff, it's just fun to share and just help out and be a sounding board, be an ear, be a support, when a newer author is feeling that self-doubt. It's just that community. And I know one of my mentees, my first year, he did not belong to a writing group or no Twitter. So it was just having that, that person put himself out there, to put his writing out there. And then a lot of, outside of the mentoring for the actual writing, it was like just helping him figure out community, like go on the hashtag, talk to people. And I guess on the back end too, just, being surrounded by the other mentees, it was something that I think, for me, it was a little eye-opening because, it was like, oh, wow, there are a lot of people who come in who they don't have a writing group, or, they maybe have one CP or had one person look at, something they've written, but, that community, that support, they didn't have it. And then it's nice to see like the Pitch Wars community, like they find it through Pitch Wars, and, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I would say the best part, or the thing that makes it the funnest, is the community. People share lines on the hashtag, people swapping chapters. For me, it's fun to go through and discover manuscripts from people that are just starting out. It's fun to discover manuscripts from people that've been doing it for a while and just need just a little bit extra to get there. It's building the relationships through there. And I have a lot of friendships and relationships that I've built over the years with people that have submitted to me that I didn't end up picking, but ended up becoming good friends with through just interacting on the hashtag or being like, hey, I'm a huge fan of your work, but I can really only pick one. And, there's a lot. It's a huge event every year. And it's something I look forward to doing every year because it's just, where all my people are at. So, yeah.
All right. Mike has asked a question, but I am not going to answer it. Sorry, Mike. I'm not gonna ask it. I'm just gonna share it because I know y'all can't see the comments. It's, would you rather fight one horse-sized chicken or 100 chicken-sized horses? Moving on. Thanks, Mike, for your contribution. As someone who isn't a romance writer and hasn't had much experience in real life romance, any advice on how to explore a romantic subplot in a novel?
Go read a lot of romances, preferably from pitchwars, mentors. But yeah.
And also watch romantic movies. You'll get a feel for how those subplots work too.
I feel like I've seen a lot of resources like on how to write romantic subplots or how to write romantic tension, how to write sexual tension into your novel, that kind of thing. So I'm sure there are a lot of like blog posts and books out there. But that question immediately made me think of, did y'all see The Old Guard on Netflix?
Yes.
So like The Old Guard is not a romance at all, right? But like the most memorable part, the part that most people talk about, is like one of the strong romantic elements in it. And so I think that's a great job of a property that's done, that doesn't have romance at its core, but it's still like very well done, you know. Jay asks, have you ever gotten a mentee that was unwilling to make certain changes? How did you overcome this? I guess in more general, if you don't want to talk about past mentees, which of course we don't, just how would you deal with a situation where a mentee didn't want to make a change that you thought was important?
It's their book, so if it's important to them, it stays. It's just how it goes. And usually I'll ask people when requesting, what is something you're unwilling to change? I'll ask that up front, so I can build an edit letter around what they're not willing to change and make sure that it stays because it's important to them.
Yeah, hard same. When we do request, we ask, is there anything that you will not change, anything that you feel is key to your story? What are you willing to change? And have a conversation about it before we ever get to the choosing stage. But yeah, even revisions with a mentee, it's your book, so you have the final say. We don't want anyone to feel like that the heart's been taken out of their story.
Anybody else?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same in any beta or CP relationship. And if there's something that somebody feels strongly about, then it's theirs. It's not my job to rewrite it for anybody. It's just my job to point out what I think could be made better. And if that resonates, that's great. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't.
I think we talked about earlier how pitchwars like mirrors the querying process, but it's also similar to working with an agent or editor. And I think a lot of authors think that once they get an agent or editor, they have to do everything every edit their agent or editor says they have to do. And that's not true either. Like if you have a good reason for something and you can articulate what that reason is, and you can explain why you want something, and you're not just being like knee-jerk reaction, I don't want to change anything, which sometimes does happen, then you don't have to make those changes either. And there are going to be some deal breaker things, of course, like especially related to like problematic content. But you always have, it's a conversation. An edit letter is always a conversation. It's never a directive, right?
Yeah, it's like at its best, kind of a group brainstorming. If someone says, I have a problem with this, it seems slow here, whatever, and you talk about what you were trying to get across, a lot of times as the writer, the solution will come to you just from brainstorming like that with someone else. And that's kind of what we're trying to help a mentee do.
Yeah. This question from Alexis makes me laugh because we're in an adult mentor chat right now, and this is more of a problem in young adult, I feel like. But do mentors ever conflict with other mentors over a manuscript? I would say in YA they fight all the time, but adult really doesn't have a problem.
No, I think
Yeah,
some
we're pretty-
mentors. Go ahead.
I was going to say we're pretty reasonable. I mean, last year, Janet and I had manuscripts that we were both interested in, and we were able to work it out in a civil way, so no fighting.
No, because I think if someone just has their heart set on a manuscript, you don't want to take it away from them. I think most of us get so many good submissions too that it's more of a problem of saying no. It's like, I want to take them and love them all.
So I just, from a like procedural standpoint, if that does happen where two mentors want the same manuscript, that is where the war of pitch wars come in. It's the only actually part that we ever refer to as a war. And basically the mentors will write the mentee a short letter saying, you know, what they want to do with the book, and the mentee gets to choose. And so that does happen. However, it is a risk for the mentor because they then can't choose anything else that another mentor has chosen as their first choice. So pretty much you only want to do that if you have, you know, a backup that someone else hasn't chosen. So it does happen. It is very rare, only a couple a year usually. Jay asked, and Jay knows me, so I don't know if you're doing this on purpose to troll me, but how important do you think reading is for a writer? I don't know if anybody knows, but I went viral last year for suggesting that writers read one book.
Yeah.
Read one book published in the last 5 years.
It's like the worst trolling I've ever experienced online.
It just blows my mind. Why would you not be reading?
So I think everyone agrees that yes, it's very important for writers to read widely in your genre, outside of your genre. Read books that you hate, read books that you like, read everything. Campbell asked, do mentors like to interact with candidates on Twitter or social media, or does that feel like a conflict of interest? I will say everyone has a different comfort level, but I'll let y'all talk about how you like to interact with people on social media.
I'm open for questions being added, like at Sonia Hartl 1 on Twitter. I'm usually around a couple times a day. I'll check in and answer any questions that pop up. I have no problem doing that. I prefer we don't DM or email because, you know, unless, you know, you say, if you come into my DMs and it's something that's like a sensitive question that you're not comfortable with asking publicly, then I am okay with getting a DM. But generally you can just at me and I will answer. But if it's something like specific, like, are you interested in elves? I'm not gonna be like, you know what I mean? Yeah, send that to me. Like if it's just you trying to get like a pitch in there, then I probably will be very vague about it. But if you have questions like specifying my wish list when that comes out, then I'm all for, yeah, ask me anything that you need to make sure that you're making the right choice for mentors for you. Because I wouldn't want you to burn a submission on me if it's something that I turn around and say, you know what, I really am not interested in seeing that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're always willing to, you know, chat and interact. We just can't answer really specific questions like that, but anything else, we're friendly.
Yep, I love chatting with people. The only thing that I don't really love, especially, excuse me, during the pitch wars window, is being tagged into memes on Twitter because I don't have the time for it. But other than that, I really love interacting with everybody on all the social media platforms.
I do as well. I'm probably more on Twitter than Facebook or Instagram, but I love interacting. I'll jump in like on some of the Pope prompts too. You can totally, when wish lists come out, you can ask me anything. I'll try to clarify if you're on the fence because I know that's important. But yeah, just the interacting, I'd love. Pope prompts is awesome. So.
Yeah, I want to clarify too when I say like on the thing, do you want elves? Like if I put on my wish list, am interested in seeing elves, and then you come and say, but I say like no on like pointy hats, and you're like, but do you want pointy hatted elves or something like that on my wish list? And I'm like, yes, let me clarify that for you. But if you're like, are you interested in a story about an elf who goes to this village and meets this other elf and they fall in love? And, if you get really, really deep into that pitch, I'm going to be like, you can send it to me and I'll see. Or I would, but I'm going to be very vague on that kind of thing. But if it's something, just clarifying wish list stuff, then absolutely open for any of those types of questions.
Yeah, we do in general discourage what we call pre-pitching, like what Sonia described. Because one, it's not really fair to other people who don't ask those questions. And two, if we allowed it and encouraged it, every mentor would get 1,000 pre-pitches and there's not enough time for that. So, yeah, I was going to say something, but I totally forgot what I was going to say. Oh my gosh, what was it? I don't know. Lee's talking about PW Pro prompts. Yeah, that's coming up later in September. I did want to mention because someone asked earlier about the other chats coming up, and I realized it's much easier to find if you go to the Pitchwars account. It's actually our pinned tweet, so that's probably the easiest way to find all of those dates. All right, last question before we say goodbye. What advice would you give for a story that flirts with the line of being adult or YA?
That I think would be what resonates with you as the writer, or is your story set in such a way that it more naturally falls into one group or the other?
I'm going to say like the tone and the type of story that you're telling are going to reflect that. Like if you have coming of age themes in your story, it's likely going to be geared more towards YA, even if you're thinking like first year of college or summer after high school, those can also be YA books and you see those coming out more. But you're generally going to know by the tone of the story. If you read both, then you'll be able to tell kind of where your story fits. Because it's not necessarily just the age of the protagonist, because there's adult novels out there that have 8-year-old, main characters. It's wholly reflective of the tone and the type of story that you're telling. And I would suggest reading both enough adult novels and enough YA novels to notice the difference between the way those stories are told.
And I'll definitely agree with Sonia. Look at the themes. Like I thought of Baby Teeth came to mind. And, you do have an adult novel that has a child character in it, but the themes are just totally different. So theme is an important part of that as well.
I listened to that book like a month ago. It is creepy. I was so creeped out. All right. So now is the time for you to promote yourself. So tell us where we can find you online. If you have any books that you want to promote, anything like that, we'll just go around in order. Let's start with Sonia.
You can find me on Twitter at Sonia Hartl1. You can find me on Instagram at Hartl Sonia. My website is soniahartl.com. Books coming out. My debut came out last year, Have a Little Faith in Me. My sophomore novel just came out on the 1st, Not Your Love Story. And next summer, I have my adult romance debuting, Heartbreak for Hire. And then I have another YA vampire book coming out next year. That's it.
You can find me on Twitter at Gwynne Jackson, on Instagram at gj.writes. My blog is gwynnejackson.wordpress.com, and I'm also at All the Kissing on Facebook and on our blog. And you can also find me every Friday for Friday Kiss.
Paris, you want to go ahead?
Sure. You can find me at Paris Wynters on Twitter. My website is pariswynters.com. Instagram, Paris Wynters, kept it nice and easy. And Facebook as well. Oh, and I have my Navy SEALs of Little Creek series. Book 1 came out in June, and book 2 just came out in September 1st.
I'm at Janet Walden-West everywhere. My website is Janet Walden-West, so I'm easy to find. You can find me every few weeks at The Million Words, a craft blog that I have with a couple of critique partners. And my contemporary romance debut came out this spring, Saltless Stilettos. And over the summer, I've had a couple of fantasy stories out in the Witches, Warriors, and Wise Women anthology and the Predators and Petticoats anthology.
All right, great. And I am Sarah Nicolas. This is my YouTube channel, so if you want to subscribe to that, that'd be great. I do a publishing talk show twice a month, and I also do some agent chats and some other videos, and as well as I'm hosting all the Pitch Wars mentor chats. So, and you can find me on Twitter at Sarah_Nicolas. Sarah has an H, Nicolas has no H. Thank you all for joining us today and answering everyone's questions, and I know everyone really appreciates it. If you're watching the replay of this, you can go back and watch like the previous chat, and we have more chats coming up. So there's a playlist on my YouTube channel, so you can find them all really easily, and you can see what's coming up as well. Thank you all. I'm gonna put up our little like logo and close out the chat, and we'll see you next time.